thanks for giving us some time on your election, busy election schedule.
My pleasure.
And we are short of time, so I want to first find out from you a little bit about who you are and your background, your biographical background.
Sure. The first thing usually people want to know is where I got my name from, Barack Obama. My father was from Kenya, from Africa.
Oh.
And my mother was from Kansas, which is why I talk the way I do. And they met as college students at the University of Hawaii, which is where I was born. I came to Chicago after college. I had gone to Columbia University and majored in political science, and I came here to work as a community organizer, working with a number of non-for-profit organizations that...
What area of organizing?
Well, what we did was there were a group of churches who had come together to try to deal with the closings of steel plants all across the country. And they didn't have much money, but they had a lot of interest in seeing how we could set up job training programs for the uninsured and other community programs. And so I was offered this job. I worked with them for several years. And after a few years, I went back to law school. Went to Harvard Law School, graduated in 1991, came back, ran a voter registration drive that registered 150,000 new people to vote in the 1992 elections. I started a civil rights practice where I worked on housing issues, civil rights issues, voting rights issues, employment discrimination. Started teaching at the University of Chicago Law School, where I still teach constitutional law and voting rights. And then in 1996, the seat that I currently occupy opened up. And so I was fortunate to be able to serve in the 13th Legislative District, where I've served for the last 8 years.
8 years. Very good. And what was the impetus to make you decide to run for Senate?
Well, I think our country is at a crossroads right now. I think it's at a crossroads internationally. I think it's at a crossroads domestically. On the international front, obviously, we're speaking in the wake of the crisis in the Iraqi prisons that has occurred. But I've been a critic generally of George Bush's foreign policy. I think this go-it-alone unilateral strategy has resulted in us alienating allies all across the globe. And I think that our incursion into Iraq has made us ultimately less safe rather than more safe. And we've got to change direction in terms of our foreign policy in a very significant way. On the domestic front, we have a situation in which I think we're seeing more and more people who are working every day, struggling to make ends meet, unable to pay for their children's college education, unable to save for retirement, in deeper and deeper debt, and unable to save for their long-term retirement and security. And so what I hope to do in this position in the United States Senate is to help change the terms of the debate and try to refocus our attention on the kinds of core values that I think ultimately Democrats are about, but also the country is about, making sure that every child has opportunity, making sure that people are able to get the kinds of help that they need when they find themselves vulnerable, when they lose their job, helping them to make ends meet in terms of college education and the educations of their children at the elementary and secondary school levels as well.
Where do you think your particular interest and talents will take you if you're elected, as far as which committees would you like to participate in, and which areas of legislation will you be, with your special talents, focus on? Well,
I think that it's premature for me to start thinking about committee assignments, but I think that there are certain areas that I have deep interest in. I'm currently the chairman of the Health and Human Services Committee in the Illinois State Senate, and I think that means that I'm very familiar with the struggles that people are going through in terms of meeting the needs of their health care bills. I would like to see us make some significant improvements in providing comprehensive health care and affordable health care to people who are currently uninsured, but also those who have health insurance but are seeing their co-payments and deductibles and premiums go up. I'd also like to focus on how we can control costs to expand access. Education is another issue where I'd like to focus a lot of attention on how we can provide more access to college educations for our young people. I have a deep interest in foreign policy, and as somebody whose father was from Kenya, who lived in Southeast Asia for many years, when I was a child because my mother was involved in international development. It's an area that I'm familiar with and I can make a contribution to. And finally, as a constitutional professor and lawyer, I think I have a potential contribution to make in the Judiciary Committee that could be really significant because I'm familiar with the issues that I think the entire country has to grapple with new Supreme Court appointments potentially coming up, debates about the Patriot Act, how we preserve our civil liberties in a situation in which we're concerned about domestic terrorism. All those issues are important.
Let's take some of those three things that you mentioned. I'll start with health. You know that we have two worlds of health, or two systems of health in America. We have the holistic, preventative, natural health, aside with the drug-oriented medicine. And as you probably know, the FDA has been putting many, many obstacles in the way of natural health. They have been bugging a lot of constitutional issues, bugging doctors who are holistic, creating a lot of problems for natural health practitioners who have been more vocal. Those who remain silent are still relatively safe. They're also trying to take away vitamins. These are the components for good, long-term, healthy America, is people becoming more aware of their nutritional needs, and yet we have the FDA trying to sabotage this issue. If elected, would you see yourself exploring more the coexistence of the natural medicine with the holistic medicine? Because people who do invest in their health will most likely be less needing the aftercare that so many people are suffering from.
Right. Well, look, prevention, I think, is 90% of effective health care.
But it's not in the current.
I understand. So that's something that I think needs to be focused on. One of my priorities at the state level has been to make sure that we're providing the kinds of preventative care, particularly for children, because right now, for example, we're seeing increases in diabetes, people who are children who are overweight, asthmatics. Particularly here in Chicago, there have been some enormous problems, and so I think that an emphasis on prevention is a smart way to go. Ultimately, will save us more money. And I think that to the extent that we are putting barriers in place for other avenues of health, then I think those need to be re-examined. But keep in mind that whatever healthcare systems we put into place, it's important that we make sure that all people have access. And one of the concerns that we have right now is that people do not have the kinds of access to health care of any sort that they need, and most people are simply going without.
We have clients in the charity that I direct who were injured, their spine, had spine injury. Instead of sending them to a chiropractor to do some of that kind of work, they gave them anti-inflammatories. A year later, they are completely unable to work. They're in agonizing pain. Nothing has been corrected skeletally. And we as a charity are sending them to chiropractors to try and do damage control. This is what I'd like to see happen in this country. Let me just turn my camera on. Okay, that's just a side idea that this is a very, very important issue that has been shoved aside for the time being. Foreign policy. I was born in Israel. I go back there every year. And I want to see peace.
Right.
And I think most Israelis want to see peace over there.
Right.
The situation in Iraq. What can we do to make sure that we don't shift so much funding to Iraq and leave nothing for the domestic policy?
Well, as I said, I was an early critic of the Bush administration's policies in Iraq. I didn't see evidence of weapons of mass destruction. I didn't see a clear link between al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein.
Yes.
I thought it was going to cost us billions of dollars and thousands of lives, and most importantly, I thought it would end up encouraging the worst impulses as opposed to the best impulses of Muslims around the world. I think all those things have come to pass, and now I think we have to work that much more diligently to internationalize the process, to bring in allies, sit them down, have them feel a part of and take a stake in the rebuilding process and reconstruction
and
process in Iraq.
perhaps also involving the Arab governments
Absolutely.
of Egypt, Jordan,
Absolutely. All the surrounding states, I think,
Whoever-
have to be engaged.
Morocco, all
Right.
the Islamic world. This is a international problem that everybody needs to have a piece in.
Absolutely. So I think that internationalization process is going to be absolutely critical. And it's one, frankly, that I think it's going to be hard for this administration to execute, because I think that they have burned so many bridges and lost so much credibility. I think it will be difficult for them ultimately to recover.
I agree. Back to the domestic situation, and I'd like to focus a few minutes on the working poor, because they are a growing level of society.
Absolutely.
And we're talking about people who are not making very much money. We're talking about mentally ill, disabled, and ex-offenders. We have millions of ex-offenders who
Right.
cannot find work
Right.
and get back into the miserable life that leads them back into the prisons.
Right. Well, this is an area that is near and dear to me, and I've worked a lot on at the state level.
It's a time bomb.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of things that we need to do with respect to the working poor. Number one, a disproportionate number of them are women. I helped negotiate the welfare reform package here in the state of Illinois, believing that work is better than welfare, but women can't enter into the workforce unless they have daycare that's sufficient, unless they have health insurance, unless they've got transportation assistance and job training assistance. And those support services are things that I have been trying to emphasize throughout my tenure.
Can I ask you briefly, in the reform, is there a timeline where a woman needs to try to get to work, or do you allow them time, leeway to raise their kids up to age, let's say, kindergarten?
Well, the way it's worked is that under federal law, and we didn't have any control of this at the state level, there was a time limit of 60 months to be on welfare. But what we did at the state level was to allow that time frame to be told, so that if, for example, a woman got work during that time frame, the time limit didn't kick in. It would then kick back in when she potentially lost her job or had to take some time off. We tried to make sure the job training and education was a permissible function that would not kick off this time frame in terms of being on welfare. So we've got one of the least punitive and most effective programs in the country. The second thing, I focused a lot on tax fairness with respect to the working poor. So we passed something called the Earned Income Tax Credit at the state of Illinois level that has provided $100 million worth of tax relief, lower taxes, to people who are working full-time but don't make very much money.
As far as the Illinois income tax?
As far as the Illinois state income tax.
Okay, but the federal income
Well, the federal
tax is
tax,
the killer.
yeah, but we already have a federal earned income tax, and this state program was modeled off the federal one. Now, the area that you specifically talked about, the issue of ex-offenders, is critical. And so last year I passed a law. We had, under state law, a perverse system that prohibited ex-offenders from getting licenses to become barbers or cosmetologists or other jobs that would allow them potentially to move into the mainstream of the economy. We eliminated that prohibition. This year we're trying to set up some expungement laws which would allow nonviolent drug offenders to be able to seal their records if they've performed, shown themselves that they've moved on. And I think that we're going to hopefully continue to make progress in this front. One area that we're going to have to work on is both literacy and substance abuse. Those programs tend to be underfunded. We don't have particularly effective job training programs within the prisons. There was a time, I think, in the 90s where the idea that we were providing job training somehow was perceived as soft on crime, and that is something that I think is makes no sense, because ultimately we've got to provide them the skills that they need so that they can hopefully make a better life for themselves.
Do you have some support down in Springfield for this notion that we have to get these people trained and busy with, meaningful activities?
Yeah, what I think has happened is I think that there has been a shift in the right direction, but it moves in fits and starts because it's subject to a lot of politics. This is an area where incumbent legislators are very sensitive about being accused of being soft on crime. And so it's critical to be able to come up with systems and plans in place that are common sense that we can get bipartisan support from, so that people don't try to politicize the issue and use it as a means of winning elections.
There are so many things we need to cover, and one of the problems is that Illinois is famous for corruption, for problems of that nature. And just recently in my own county, they built this monstrosity judicial annex that cost, I think, $45 million. And much of it went to people who, it could have been much, much cheaper. Millions of dollars could have been saved on this building. But it went to all kinds of people who will kick back donations down the road to the DuPage politicians. And this happens all over the place. There is no accountability. There is no way to come after these people and say, what have you done? And the media is asleep, asleep in this state. So, DCFS reforms, judicial reforms, when women lose custody to perpetrators of domestic violence in DuPage or Lake County, they have nowhere to turn to. Mothers whose kids are molested have nowhere to turn to if the husband has the right connections and the kids are taken away from the mother and given to molesters. DCFS, up to now there's some changes, there was nowhere for us as advocates to turn to on the higher levels of DCFS to make some changes.
Well, I'm not familiar with all the issues that you talked about. What I am...
it's a systematic problem.
What I do think is true is that people feel cynical about the political process, and they feel cynical about their government. And one of the things that we've tried to do, both in the campaign, but I also as a legislator, is to make sure that we're putting those structures in place that can create more transparency and more accountability. So the first bill that I ever passed was working with former U.S. Senator Paul Simon to set up the first campaign ethics reform laws in Illinois in 25 years. I've been a sponsor of the Open Meetings Act that allows the public to know what's going on in key meetings that are taking place in government. And I think you're absolutely right that part of what I think all voters expect is that their money is going to be well spent, that the rule of law is going to apply to everybody and not just some people. And that's how I've tried to conduct myself while I've been in office, and I think that that's how all voters expect their public officials to operate, and hopefully I'll be a good role model for that in my position as a U.S. Senator.
Peter Fitzgerald, whose seat you may be replacing, brought into Chicago Patrick Fitzgerald to clean up and send a message. And this man has done some pretty good things during his few years in Illinois. Do you think we need to keep this man?
I think that Mr. Fitzgerald has done a good job. I think that
not enough, but he's done some.
No, I think he's done a good job. He's somebody that I would feel comfortable with continuing on as the United States Attorney after his term expires.
And I'll tell you, a lot of people are afraid to vote for Kerry for fear that they will lose Fitzgerald. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, well, I think
I wanted you to be aware of this.
Yeah, I think what people should also be aware of, though, is I think that the Democratic administration of John Kerry, I suspect, will be just as concerned with making sure that corruption is rooted out as Mr. Fitzgerald has been. I think that he deserves commendation for the work that he's done. But I think that the idea that corruption is a monopoly of either party. I mean, lately the Republicans, I think, have been getting hit with a lot of scandals. But in the past, certainly Democrats have been just as guilty of it. I think it's there's a culture that needs to be changed in terms of Illinois politics generally, and I hopefully can be a part of the change.
Good. Back to housing. The HUD was cut to the bones since Reagan, and it hasn't improved during the Democratic administrations of Clinton. Is there any chance that we can see more certificates, more HUD certificates, more incentives in the area of housing? For example, in DuPage, affluent DuPage, landlords never wanted to rent out. Now they are running to rent out to low income, because most of the low income in DuPage are you and me who just lost our jobs and got downsized.
Downsized, right. Well, you know, I think that this is an area that the federal government has to make a renewed commitment to. You know, there is a crisis in housing in metropolitan areas like Chicago, particularly affordable housing. And one of the things that we're going to have to do in order to change it is to make sure that we've got resources from the federal government that reflect that priority. Unfortunately, the federal government, I think, has not shown the kind of commitment that we need to housing policy. You've seen a systematic diminution of various HUD programs, including the Section 8 voucher program. That's going to have to be rolled back, but the only way we're going to be able to roll it back is if we have an administration that cares about it. Absolutely.
Yes, but is this something that you're interested in looking into? Wonderful. What are some of the greatest challenges and obstacles facing your campaign at this time?
Well, you know, I think that we were very successful in the primary, working with the kinds of issues that we have been speaking about here. I think people really understand that basically they have to work hard if they want to make a way in this country. I think we're an individualist society. I think that you know, we believe in the free market, and all those things are good. But I think people also believe that every child should get a decent education, that people shouldn't be bankrupt when they get sick, that our children should be educated, and that a lack of money shouldn't be a barrier to being able to get a college education, and that our senior citizens should be able to retire with some dignity and respect. And I think that those issues are the ones that we are going to be focusing on, along with the important issues of foreign policy. And if we are able to get our message out effectively and maintain the tone of positive, hopeful vision for the country that we tried to project during the primary, then I think we'll do very well.
Well, I think we've covered the main issues, and I'll let you go.
Right. Well, thank you very much.
You have much to do.
I do have much to do, but it was a pleasure being with you, and I look forward to campaigning actively out in DuPage.
Absolutely. We have already discussed bringing you to COD and having a town meeting with you and Jack Ryan, if you're interested.
Okay. We look forward to having conversations about all these issues in the months to come.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great.
Tape's rolling, and in 5, 4, 3.
Never in recent history of Illinois' elections has one political candidate demonstrated so consistently a clear vision and a clear action path aimed at serving the best interest of the people of Illinois. The man, Barack Obama, is now running for the USA Senate, having won the Democratic primary in Illinois despite opposition by opponents who were better funded and under the, let me do the second one again.
Start from the top.
Okay. Never in recent history of Illinois' election has one political candidate demonstrated so consistently a clear vision and a path of action aimed at serving the best interests of the people of Illinois. Barack Obama is now running for the USA Senate's, oh shit.
I tell you what, just do the first one.
Okay.
3.
The very first one. Never in recent history of Illinois' election has one political candidate demonstrated so consistently a clear vision and a path of action aimed at serving the best interest of the people of Illinois. This man, Barack Obama, is now running for the U.S. Senate, having won the Democratic primary, despite opposition by opponents with more money and more political machine backing. His victory was truly a grassroots effort. Why is he running for Senate? And what does he hope to accomplish if elected is the focus of this coming interview. Can Barack Obama change the way politics work in Illinois? And can he make a real difference after decades of political stagnation and corruption? This is what we are going to discuss today. I could do the last one a little bit. I kept. Can Barack Obama change the way politics work in Illinois? And can he make a real difference after decades of political corruption and betrayal of Illinois voters by politicians who did not put the needs of Illinois citizens first?